Hi everyone, I'm Alex and I'm from Bulgaria and I am the external coordinator of SCDAI. You may wonder what SCDAI may mean, but SCDAI, it stands for Student Center for Diversity, Advocacy and Inclusion. And it's a student organization that is maintained by students and it is meant for students. And at SCDAI we focus on establishing a more inclusive and diverse environment in higher education, and we're based in the Netherlands, in Groningen more specifically. But yeah, as I said, I'm Alex, and I have been part of the SCDAI team since the beginning. I'm the external coordinator of the team, and yeah, today I'll be telling you a little bit more about trigger warnings, what the concept of trigger warnings really means, and what their purpose is. And of course, as well, how you can use them in your presence online. But yeah. Without further ado, this brings me to my very first point, which is specifically what are trigger warnings. Trigger warnings are, warnings at the beginning of, for example, a video, text, audio, which signal to the audience that the contents of this piece may be upsetting or disturbing in some way. In other words, whatever the audience is observing may bring up unpleasant emotions within them, for example, because of some previous trauma that they may have experienced related to the topic, or it can be simply upsetting to them due to the heavy nature of the topic itself. Trigger warnings are a rather, modern concept of ensuring the emotional and mental safety of its audience. However, if we think back, we've had plenty of examples of trigger warnings, which date decades back. They were simply not maybe labeled as trigger warnings, and we all know them, I believe. These are most prominently warnings at the beginning of, for example, films or movies, which warn the audience that the specific movie is not suitable for people, say, who are 18, 16, or 12 maybe years old. And it's the same concept as a trigger warning. Some or all of the content of the movie or the media that is being consumed can be traumatizing to children and young teenagers, which is why a lot of movies have the little red circle, or that's at least how I know it, saying that people under the age of, for example, 12 should not be watching this movie. And of course, in this case, parents can choose to permit or not permit their children to be exposed to this content. Now to my second point, which is why use trigger warnings and why these are important. Especially in the increasingly digital world that we all live in and share, we are constantly exposed to information and stimuli all day long. For those of us who, actively consume social media and other forms of media, including written text, this can be a lot for our mental and emotional capacity. While we may not even consider how the constant exposure of diverse messaging may affect us, it regardless makes a print in our subconscious. The effects of this can be traced in the worrying mental health of many young people, not just young people, by the way. And it's not necessarily to say that mental health issues are a modern concept, but rather that media, and of course, especially social media, has a very heavy and sometimes detrimental effect on it. And if we want to preserve our mental and emotional health, we need to consider that we're not going to always be ready to be exposed to so many different kinds of heavy topics and messaging, which is one reason why trigger warnings are so incredibly important, just so we can use these as a shield and say, hey, right now, I'm not emotionally there to see yet another video about climate change, and that is okay. But we just need to know that we're going to be exposed to heavy messaging on this. And I'm not saying we should ignore what's happening in the world around us, not at all, but rather that especially for people who are very socially engaged and aware and interested in their environment, like in the environment around them, it's very important to have this and to know this is the type of content that you will be consuming. But beyond this, trigger warnings are especially important for people who have trauma connected to the topics that are being discussed or portrayed in the content that an audience may be viewing. This includes trauma caused by both physical and emotional violence or other forms of losses. And while it is not possible, of course, to remove triggers in our environments in general, or ensure constant mental safety, that's not possible. It's not realistic, because trauma and therefore triggers of said trauma are extremely individual, so they can't necessarily be anticipated for everything. But at least a trigger warning helps the audience prepare emotionally and leave mental and emotional space for the content to be consumed, if they wish to proceed to consume the content. And in this way, through leaving this mental and emotional space for us to be able to comprehend and engage with the information that is being presented, we need to be given the opportunity and space to make use of maybe coping mechanisms that we have developed for ourselves, whether that is through help of a therapist or your own efforts. And now to my third and final point, how can we really make use of trigger warnings? And well, to be fair, there are a few very simple methods that we can all employ, especially if we not just consume social media or other forms of media, but especially if we create different forms of media. You don't have to be an influencer. I even mean if you are just sharing your thoughts and experiences with your audience, however big or small that may be. But generally speaking, there are a few things that you can do. For example, if you are going to share information or portrayals of forms of violence, sexual violence, or physical, emotional violence, maybe death, addiction, or other similar heavy topics, make sure to add a trigger warning, whether that is in your caption or in, if it's in the beginning of a text that you may be sharing. If it's a visualization, an image, you can still find a way to add a trigger warning. In this way, you prepare your audience and help them have this emotional and mental space, what I said before. And I think a very important moment for adding trigger warnings is that not just to add them like, oh, okay, I think this is this kind of topic, so here is a TW trigger warning, but rather make sure that you add it in a sensible way. So if you're going to add a trigger warning, make sure that the trigger warning gives the audience or the viewer sufficient time to maybe click away from this content and not be exposed to the trigger warning and the trigger at the same time. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative. There is, of course, a lot more to talk on the topic of trigger warnings and emotional and mental safety online. But yeah, please feel free to comment, share, of course, subscribe to our channel, and let us know maybe that we missed something. Is there something else that you're interested in regards to this topic? And yeah, thank you for watching.